you're gonna get free this time. Falling into a blue sky mind. Came to me in that song, my friend.
Hello, welcome back to You, Me, and the Elephant. This is Deb Air. I am your host. Let me start first with sharing what the question is today. So, today I'm asking, what is it that you see? What do you see? How do you see? Those of you that are not on YouTube right now, you can't see this, but I happen to be cosmically, serendipitously wearing a shirt that has a pug face, and the pug is wearing seeing glasses. I love how that stuff happens. So this question arose for me the other day at the end of my shift in my practice. My amazing practice coordinator, admin extraordinaire, Vero, shout out to Vero. God bless her, because I have this tendency to be in another room and I'm so excited to talk to her, but I'm still really committed to packing up my things and getting home for the dogs. And so I'm doing the classic American thing, which is called multitasking, which many studies are out there and they're saying, like, that's not really how we function most effectively, but we're very conditioned to be multitasking. So anyways, I'm packing up my things and she'll go to like, oh, I've started to shut the music off because we have music playing in the practice. And because I know, like, Dr. Deb's going to start talking to me, and she's so kind. She actually wants to hear me. She could just be like, yes, yes, yes. Or like, listen, woman, if you want to talk to me, come into the same room, look me in the eyes and have a conversation. This is an interesting thing because that's me calling myself out going, wow, like I'm so committed to my habit of what, like, needing to pack up my things. I already have this vision of what I'm doing, but I so desire connection and downloading of the day that I can't wait to do them one at a time. I'm just doing them all at once. Let's say if I just went into the room and said, hey, let's sit down and let's talk about the day for a moment, the conversation would actually probably be shorter and it would be much more meaningful. What does this have to do with what is it that you see? What do you see on a daily basis? It has everything to do with it because today we're going to talk about what are the components of seeing. There are a lot of different ways in which we can look at what we look at, and even the difference between looking and seeing. So in this example, I realized that I could see, I wasn't looking at Vero. I'm yelling from a different room and I'm doing something else. So my attention, my ability to see is fragmented. And that is just a small example of how most of us are being tested and fragmented all the time with our attention. The things that I want to go over today is what are the components of seeing? Like, let's just define it for today for this conversation. And also, what are the things that influence what we see, what we pay attention to, what we take in? And the third thing is beyond what the influences are, like, how can we understand this viewpoint that to see is a type of receiving. We're receiving light, we're receiving images, we're receiving information. There's this interesting paradox because most of us aren't really great at receiving. And I think there's a reason why. And I think that it is also related to what we're talking about today. And lastly, I'm just going to give you some really easy things to work with that where you can begin to become more present with what you're checking in with, what you're actually seeing in a way that I think could have a real supportive, positive impact for you. So, what are the components of seeing? One of the most simple, most obvious components would be we use our eyes, right? We use these eyeballs. And so what's interesting is the actual biology and physiology of vision, of seeing, is a very complex thing. And we will not go through the complexity of it. But what I do want you to know is your eyes don't work alone. I mean, there's some really interesting things. Your eyes are just taking in light. images and into the retina. And the retina is actually taking in light and form. And that light is hitting the retina. And the way that the form comes in, it's actually upside down. So, how crazy is it that we actually are taking through our eyeballs light images that are upside down, which I think is fantastic as a reminder that there are so many components to what we take in and information we take in, and how absolutely miraculous our bodies are and what they accomplish every day when we don't even think about it. Imagine if you just looked outside and everything was upside down. And sometimes it does feel like that. And I'll talk about why I think that's the case. So our eyes, our retina takes in the light, it takes in the images, it's upside down, and the retina basically transforms that light into electrical impulses. And those electrical impulses go to the visual cortex of the brain, which is the back of the brain, the occipital lobe, which decodes it to see what it actually is, which means that you see things as they are, sort of. We're supposed to see it, but I question, when we're looking through our eyes, what are we actually seeing? There's a lot of brain function that must happen before we can actually see in a literal biological, physiological sense. This is going to go to the next thing I'm going to be talking about, which is what are the things that influence what we see or how well we see. So our eyes are part of our seeing. Our brain is a significant part of our seeing. So really what I'm talking about, because this all happens through the nervous system, right? The optic nerve goes into the brain, and it's what we call a cranial nerve. So I'm always going to go back to, because it's just the lifelong truth that your nervous system health, vitality, flexibility, coherence is so vitally important to your life. So we use our brain, we use our eyes, and we also use our senses, right? I remember one time being at a program, receiving this energetic work to my spine, and my son was also there. And I was in a profound state of being in my neurology and my consciousness. And my son was on a table near me, and the facilitator says, "Turn your head and open your eyes." And I turned my head and I opened my eyes and I looked at my son. And because I was using the state that I was in, all of my senses were very clear and they were all working. And I say this to my clients all the time, like in orchestration with one another. So I was in this like very clear, expanded state. I just looked at him with my eyes, and he is in this beautiful, like, I felt like he was just in union with God or with the cosmos. And as soon as I could see him, I popped up off the table, spun around. Like I had this, like, it was like an explosion of God joy. I don't know how to explain it. Just all this energy came up through my body, up through my heart, out through my crown. I'm saying this because the components of seeing beyond the eyes themselves, and the combination of that unison or conversation between the eyes and the brain and all the different parts of the brain that help us see, like all I had to do is use my eyes, and my eyes, because of all the other senses in me that were really expanded, when I used my eyes I saw so much more. When we are connected more to our senses, we have more access to consciousness, and we become more in a state of presence. But the point is that how we see is coming in from so many things beyond our eyes. So the more connected we are, the more our senses are aware. That actually picks up from the environment. And when the light, like when I looked at my son, when the light of his reflections hit my retina, because everything else was really expanded, I was able to see him in, his soul godly form, and had such a powerful experience with that. So remembering that seeing comes from all of these components. One of my brothers is a pilot, And when they can't visually see, the visual acuity's down, it's cloudy, then they do something called instrument flying. And the instrument flying is like sensing what's happening. So it's giving them their eyes, right? And I mean, we know that those of you that know somebody who's blind, their senses enhance greatly and they can see a lot. I have a friend who is almost completely blind, and this man walks all around my town, crossing streets like fast. It blows me away. And this happened in his adulthood. And one of the things that he shared with me is one of the gifts that came with it is that he became so much more aware through other senses that allowed him to be able to see differently and therefore experience life differently within himself and within his relationships. So, if we move into the influences, now, if we see with our eyes, we see with our brain, we see with all of our senses and our nervous system, then it makes sense that any impact or change or shift we have to our eyes, to our brain, to our nervous system, our senses are going to impact what we can see. So let's talk about the whole technological internet world. When we're talking about like screen time and attention span. So attention span is related to what you can take in. It's another way of how you can see. Overall, we've been trending where our attention span has gotten shorter and shorter. So let me give you an example of just the biological process. So when we are stressed, when we have a sense of fear, and I don't have all the percentages, but they're high of how many people experience at least some anxiety almost every day. States of depression and the mental health of our world has really been impacted by the recent years with the pandemic. All of those things have escalated. We're either riddled by fear or exhaustion or overwhelm or, like I said, depression. What all those things do is actually put you in some state of fight or flight. And fight or flight's job is to save your life. So it puts you in this state of fear and when we're in a state of fear, what happens to our vision is we have to narrow our vision. So we lose our peripheral vision because the job of the nervous system in that moment in fight or flight is to have you be really acutely focused in a short moment because the saber-toothed tiger is right there and you need to just focus on the saber-toothed tiger and you don't want to have this expansive awareness. You want to be really focused. So the challenge though is that when we are in states of anxiousness, when we're in states of exhaustion, we narrow what we see. In fact, the trend that I was talking about of average attention span in screen time, we've gone from, let's say, Facebook to Instagram to TikTok. And if you see the trend of even that, Facebook is going to be a little bit longer of an attention span. People can write long posts. Maybe they have a picture. When you have Instagram, and now of course Facebook has this too, but Instagram, you have these stories. So you can just see a moment, just a moment. Okay, I can take this information, boom, and then I get another hit, boom, then I get another hit. The comprehension of those things is also going to be low, right? Because you're just having these fragmented hits of information or visual input, and they're all different, right? And then TikTok is even shorter. I don't have TikTok, but I know it's kind of basically the technological world is developing in congruence to or developing it so that we are more distracted, however you want to look at it. But in 2004, the average screen attention span was 150 seconds. So you could stay on one thing for 150 seconds. So maybe you're reading a Facebook post and you're really into the post, you're reading it. Now people would look at a long post. Most people won't even be able to take the time to read it because their attention span, their ability to see and connect with the moment is getting shorter. So in 2013, that screen attention span went down to 75 seconds. and in 2023 down to 47 seconds. This trend of not being able to focus long enough, see long enough with something is impacting how connected we are, what we're actually able to see. The average adult internet user's attention span is 8.2 seconds at a time. So I think screen time is like they have to look away, but I think the attention span, and that's what I meant about like the stories on Instagram or the little videos on TikTok. And a goldfish's attention span is 9 seconds. So we are now below the attention span of a goldfish. There is a trend of our worlds getting narrower and narrower in what we're capable of seeing. Speaking to the amount of people I see, I can see these trends in their reality. And then working with them, I can see how their attention spans, what they're able to see, what they're able to perceive. We know that what we perceive becomes our reality because that's all we know. That's the input. So, what I get to see with people I work with is that their perception and their seeing expands, and therefore their worlds expand. But when we're in fight or flight, this was actually a daunting statistic on perception of information. And this is specifically on ADHD, but also just the cognitive implications, the mental implications of just all the screen time. And I mean, all age groups. In this particular statistic, we're talking about 2,500 teenagers and that have ADHD. And of those 2,500 teenagers that have ADHD, only 5.9% had ADHD from birth, where 81% of those 2,500 teenagers had ADHD after 24 months of extensive technological usage. This is not something we're going to get rid of, but that's why I'm going to end with I'm going to end with some things that we can do to slow it down a little bit and really value what we're seeing, which is so important. I just got back from Costa Rica and I was watching this little inchworm that was on my brother's backpack. And I don't know if you've ever seen an inchworm, but they have really bad eyesight. And this goes back to what I said at the beginning here. So they're using other senses. So they really pick up vibration. And so I would see it like in its little, hump. And then its front of the worm would like feel around in the air where to go. And it would just feel and then it would land. And it had this whole path. And really, what it was doing, it was relying kind of like the pilots on the instrument flying, it was taking in the vibrations. So, what happens is because we're so stimulated, and I'm going to speak about this paradox in a moment, we're so overstimulated as a culture, our nervous systems are often on high. If your system is on overdrive, it becomes hard to sleep at night. We have a hard time unwinding because the switch is on, but you're not coming back into a harmonious state within your nervous system. So you're already full. It's like your nervous system is already a glass that's already full and potentially overflowing. What can sometimes be confusing is overwhelm when you're full and that the switch is on, that can also be exhausting because what's happening is like all this energy is being turned on, but it's not going anywhere. It's not really effective. It's just on waiting for a threat to happen. We don't even have to think that we're scared. It's simply the amount of the bits of information we're taking in. And this has been happening for quite a few years, but now with the attention spans going down, what technology is doing, it's using that multitasking ability or way, and it's giving us quick distractions, right? So we have notifications on our phone, and every time we take in information, maybe it's a notification of a text. Maybe it's a notification of an email. We may be excited for that. So it's going to give us a dopamine hit. We're going to feel connected because as human beings, that's all we want. We are here to remember that we're all connected and that we are here to be in relationship and relating with each other through the eyes of love, through the eyes of something bigger. And we are also part of that something bigger. So that's at the core of every human being. So there's this craving to feel connected. But because we have been directed so much virtually, then we are having less time in person. And I can't remember who I was speaking to, but we were talking about young children and how, like, their teenage kids are having relationships via text. They would barely talk to each other in school in person, but when they got on text, they would start to have a more intimate conversation. So what's happening with our vision is that we're getting these like dopamine hits and we're like, "Oh, I see that. Okay, I see that. Okay, I got that." So we're on this fragmented dopamine search. Here comes the paradox. I feel like almost 100% of the people that I've spoken to and worked with over the many years, almost everybody has said at one point in time when they're sharing about their desire to become more vulnerable, to become more present, is that they have a hard time receiving. They have a hard time being vulnerable. And I'm just going to state for the record, which I think I have stated here before, that you are not alone. Almost every person has a hard time receiving. How that looks might be different for everybody. I believe the reason is what I'm speaking to now is that when we see, whether we're looking at a screen, whether we're looking at a person, looking down at our phone, when we see something, it is a type of receiving. And again, seeing comes not just through our eyes, but through our senses. So there's a lot of environmental stimulus, whether it's digitally or, through media, which I guess is still digital, and then just the noise of our world. So there's a lot of stimulus. And what happens is when we're seeing that, we're receiving information. And yet we're often less conscious of what we're taking in. So we may be addicted to these dopamine hits. So we're craving something deeper. Here's the paradox: we're craving to receive more, we're craving to feel more intimate, feel more connected in our relationships. We want to get vulnerable, but we're petrified. We're afraid of being hurt, have our heart broken. We're afraid for our kids. Like, we're afraid to soften because somehow also we think softening is a sign of weakness. When really, when we can receive what is in our heart's desire, it actually strengthens us. But we have all of this seeing, all of these hits, all of these ways where we're overstimulated. So we're actually already full. So what happens when we want to receive, when we want to soften into deeper connection with somebody, deeper connection to your purpose, what you're doing with your career, is that we can't. We can't because we're already full. Our body is already full trying to release something, or it's holding so tightly because it's so full, and it's also like because it's in fear. And so when we try to receive, we're trying to deepen a relationship. Let's say it's with your child or with your partner or even a friendship. We can't do it. We can't receive. So therefore we suck at receiving. But yet we crave it. Why do we crave it? We crave receiving because all of this information that's coming in is in a great part fragmented. And a lot of it is unconscious. Even when we're deciding to go on Facebook or deciding to scroll on Instagram. I was on the plane the other day, and I want to say at least 90% of people were just, this is all I saw before we took off, like scrolling. And it's just like a zombie apocalypse. That's what it feels like. There's information coming in, but there's not information really of meaning because we can't really touch the meaning within ourselves when it's just quick, 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 under 8.2 seconds. So we're getting these quick hits of information. It lets our brain go, oh God, okay, it has a moment of pleasure. But what happens is the more dopamine hits we get, how do I say this? It has a reverse response. The more often we get these dopamine hits, the less potent the pleasure gets and the larger the pain gets. So the bigger craving for the dopamine hit. That's what addiction is. So whether it's addiction to a drug or addiction to technology, the reality, and it's my belief that we all have an aspect of addiction just by nature of how we're living. This is why we have these conversations because it's the elephant. It's right there, it's right in front of us. It's a big, fat, juicy elephant. And it's not something we're going to change overnight. And I don't see technology changing. And, we're moving into AI, we're moving into all these things. So, how do we take charge? How do we take some ownership? How can you take ownership of what you choose to let penetrate you, what you choose to see? There's simple ways in which we can start to become more present with that. I think that when we do, it's going to enhance our ability to soften, that ability of that fight or flight switch to relax so that we can have a bit more space within us and a bit more room to receive and to see, because seeing is a type of receiving. We want to see and we want to be seen. We're afraid to see and we're afraid to be seen. So that's the same paradox. Some things we can do is we can say, wait, let's take an inventory of what I'm choosing to see. What do you choose to see in the day? On your phone, I don't know about you, it just automatically tells me, like, oh, you used your phone a half hour more than last week. I actually like that notification because it forces me to reflect how I'm spending my time, what I'm letting see me. What am I seeing and what am I letting see me or penetrate me? When we can take breaks, when we can pause, and it's hard sometimes because what happens is sometimes we're going to have a hard time just relaxing because we're needing these quick hits. We're used to, instead of deep conversation or deep intimacy, we're used to more fragmented quick hits, which satisfies, but the pain keeps getting more, the urge keeps getting more because of the impact of how dopamine works in our system. So, the first question for you is, what are you seeing? The first thing you can do is just decide, can you take an hour and shut your phone off? I often will watch a show at night, and now I'm like, okay, let me watch the show tonight, but let me just see what it feels like to go to bed and start reading a book, and or just do some breathing exercises and let myself go at that. So I'm not in front of the screen, because the screen and the EMFs and all these things all have impact and stimulus of how much information and how much stress is coming into our system, and therefore how full we are. And in there lies the crazy making paradox, is that we're so overstimulated and over full, and we're craving more. To go back to the core of this conversation, it's because we are craving something more true. We're craving something more intimate. We're craving to know ourselves more. We're craving to know and feel more connected to others, but we're petrified because really we're just over full. We're a flowing cup of fullness. The trick is, how can we actually lighten the load of how much we're taking in? Again, can you shut your phone off for an hour? Can you go for a walk without your phone? Simple little things. You don't have to cut yourself off, but without an actual decision or devotion, and ask a friend, maybe do it with your family. Many of you are already doing this, which is fantastic. And I'm curious to hear what that feels like. Another thing you can do, and I think this is very common, especially for people you live with, is that where it's kind of what I said at the beginning when I was talking to Vero from another room. How often are you looking at your phone while you're talking to somebody in the room? How often are you in the same room and actually not looking into this person's eyes? Can you allow your gaze to everybody you speak to this week to last 3 seconds longer? 1, 2, 3. It may feel awkward for a moment, but it also is going to feel more connected. If we could do that even 2 times a day, where you consciously allow your gaze to go 3 seconds longer, Just that alone, how that could impact, because what happens is you're slowing something down that's normally a quick fragment. So you're bringing an aspect of what we call novelty into something that has become habitual, right? We're looking at things, but are we really seeing? Many of us have done exercises where the facilitator says, close your eyes and says, okay, what's in the room? Is what is brown in the room? What is red in the room? What is yellow in the room? What is blue in the room? And a lot of us go, oh my God, I have no idea. That's because in general, we are in our thought process more than we are in our presence to what's right in front of us. So therefore, we're not paying attention to our environment. And one of the things that's exhausting is that because our visual acuity has narrowed and we're not paying attention, it actually falls to our mental status and our energy and our physical energy to try to pay attention. So we're using our mental stimulus and our physical stimulus more than we need to. It's like going back to that story when I just looked at my son because everything was so on. It was 1 second, and I had so much information that was meaningful that lit me up. How great would it be to look at somebody that you love 3 seconds longer and be able to take in and receive so much more in just a regular conversation and moment. This is how you begin to learn how to receive. You choose to become more present with what you're seeing. You choose to decide what you let see you, what you let penetrate you. And when I say that, I mean, what are you looking at? What are you reading? I tease my clients all the time because something will happen. They're like, well, I Googled it, and you go down the rabbit hole and you're here and you're there. And even the information is fragmented. And now you're robust and overwhelmed with like, oh my God, I just had a scratch on my eye and now I know I'm going to die. We go to the escalated states. And that is because we've stopped trusting our own receivership of information that lies within us. When we can get quiet and we can start practicing getting off technology a little bit, gazing 3 minutes longer, these are examples of being able to slow down enough. Like tonight, when you go in your bedroom, turn on the light, look around. What do you see? Look at your bedroom like you're looking at it for the first time. Look at your partner like you're looking at them for the first time. What do you see? Initially, it's hard because we're so inundated in our heads, and depending on the societal influences of information, our history, our traumas, there's things that will stimulate our brains in a way that say this isn't safe. So what we do is we go into a habitual nature of what we see, what we thought we saw. And what we think we see is often a defensive shield around what's actually happening. And we're not alone in this. This is the world we live in. So it's important to have some of these strategies that allow us to begin to take charge of what we're taking in and what we're seeing. It is the gateway to the very thing we all crave, which is to feel like we can receive more. Because I hear this in my sister goddess group. It's like, I suck at receiving. And every woman thinks they're the only one that doesn't receive well. And but everybody's saying the same thing. And it's my upbringing, it's this, it's my the way that my parents raised me, it's all the reasons. So those influence what we think we're capable of receiving. But when we can slow down and let our nervous system take a damn break and decompress some of the fullness that's happening by shutting off our phone or going for a walk without your phone, 3 seconds longer for the gaze. Another thing that we all can do that is free is we can bring some more consciousness to our breath. I'm going to keep this really specific to this particular conversation. My suggestion is starting with a breath in for 5 seconds and then exhaling for 10 seconds. So let the emptying be double the amount of what you're taking in. Because remember, seeing is a way of taking in information. So if we can take a breath in for 5 seconds, and we're going to exhale for 10. And what you may notice initially is that it might be hard, like you may go quickly on that exhale because you're ready to take in the next stimulus. So, what we're doing is we're training the body to begin to be able to empty out because we want to take in, we want to receive, meaning we want to feel more calm, we want to feel more safe, but we can't unless we're able to exhale and release some of what we're already filled up with, which is riddled with all of the fear that we're taking in on all of the social media, on all of the news, and all of the ways that we take in information. So, having some control of your technology and then this breath, what I would do is I would get up to 10 seconds on the inhale and 20 seconds on the exhale. Even for 1 week, if you can do the gaze, shut your phone off, and do the breath. And the last thing I'm going to say, and I've said this before, is look up 2 times a day. Look up, preferably outside. But if you're inside, it's okay too. When you look up, what do you see? Did you notice a bird flying by? Did you see the blue, blue sky? Are you amazed by the way the clouds are forming? Do you see images in the clouds? Is it at night? Do you see stars? Does looking at the stars remind you that you're connected to something bigger? Just look up. If the desire for every human is to really receive and feel connected to others, we need to begin to empty out and we need to become more discerning on what we choose to see. I'm going to end today with a poem which goes like this. Every day, someone looks at me with conditioned eyes, making wild guess judgments about the length of my hair, the color of my skin, the maker of my shoes, never knowing what is real or who I really am. Once someone looked at me through a compassionate heart, and all that was invisible was revealed. In the light of the pain, fear, love, hope, fresh wounds and old scars, longing and aspiration, and my own heart smiled under that gentle gaze in the clarity of both seeing and being truly seen. Thank you so much for taking this journey with me. Until next time. And now, Trevor Hall with Blue Sky Mind.
Through the body, it's in and through the body.